Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to sift through the noise, look closely at the sources, and pull out the insights that matter, really cutting through the complexity so you can be genuinely informed. Today, we're plunging into something that, it impacts every single one of us. Aging, our health, and, a pretty provocative view on the pharmaceutical industry's role in it all. Our mission here is to explore some, frankly, challenging claims from our source material. We're questioning some conventional wisdom about getting older and just laying out what the source says for you to consider. Okay, let's unpack this then. Imagine for a second if maybe much of what you thought you knew about aging, especially past, say, 90, wasn't quite the full picture. What if the way to a really vibrant, healthy, long life wasn't always just in a pill bottle? Or, maybe even weirder, what if that wasn't the main goal of the systems we think are designed to keep us healthy?
Yeah, what's really fascinating here is how our sources frame this whole challenge. They put forward a very provocative claim, basically that some parts of the medical establishment and specifically the pharmaceutical industry might actually have a vested interest in just managing how long we live and the symptoms of aging, rather than actively pushing for and delivering truly extended, healthy lives, especially once people get past 90. So we're here to explore those claims with you, just impartially laying out the information that's in the source material.
Right. And the core of today's deep dive, it comes from excerpts from the Longevity Conspiracy, Big Pharma and Extended Life. And this isn't just some light reading. It's a book that flat out promises to pull back the curtain on what it calls, very boldly, a profitable conspiracy. Makes some claims that, honestly, really grabbed our attention. We think they'll grab yours too. The author definitely knows how to hook you right from the start. Our source kicks off with this really astounding story. It's about the author's 91-year-old grandmother. She'd been on 5 different meds, heart, blood pressure, cholesterol for like 15 years. Then, completely against medical advice, she makes this frankly terrifying decision to just stop taking them, cold turkey. Can you imagine the family's reaction? But within 6 months, the change was apparently incredible. She went from shuffling with a walker, lots of brain fog, to walking 3 miles every single morning. Memory sharp, skin healthy, and her blood work better than it had been in 20 years. Now, that kind of personal story, going against so much of what we're usually told, it really makes you pause, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And that story, while obviously just one person's experience and definitely not medical advice for anyone listening, it acts as the spark for the whole investigation in the source. It really forces you to ask, how can one person improve so dramatically just by removing medications? It seems to fly in the face of the usual medical narrative about aging and needing drugs. So the source uses this to suggest maybe there are other paths to health at advanced ages, or perhaps just a different understanding of how these powerful drugs actually interact with very old, sometimes fragile bodies. It really challenges us to look past just managing symptoms.
Okay, so that individual story is powerful, but does it connect to anything bigger? Well, the source quickly zooms out. It asks us to look at places like Sardinia in Italy, Okinawa in Japan, the famous blue zones. What's amazing there is people routinely live past 100, often taking, get this, 0 prescription meds. 0. Now put that right next to the U.S., where the average person over 65 is apparently on 7 different drugs at the same time. The source makes a really strong claim here, this huge difference. It's not an accident. It says, quote, "This is design." That's a serious challenge to how we see modern healthcare, right?
It's a very pointed claim, yes. And the source tries to explain what it means by design. It brings in this claim from a Dr. Sarah Chen, described as a former pharmaceutical researcher who supposedly came forward back in 2019. She allegedly revealed internal company memos from the 90s, and these memos supposedly discuss something called optimal patient lifespan management. The source interprets these documents as basically strategies to make sure patients would need more and more medication as they got older. The goal wasn't finding a cure, but, as the documents allegedly put it, creating sustainable profit streams through managed decline. It suggests this business model focused on managing symptoms, keeping patients just well enough to keep buying products, rather than aiming for real, lasting health.
So the economic argument the source makes is pretty stark then. It basically asks us to think logically. If big pharma companies could create drugs that actually reversed aging, or prevented all age-related diseases, or helped people live vibrantly to 120 without getting sick, would they release them? Or would that research just get quietly shelved? The source claims the answer is obvious when you follow the money trail. Okay. From this viewpoint, every healthy, drug-free year you live past 90 is like thousands of dollars in lost revenue for pharmaceutical companies, maybe even insurance companies too. They argue these businesses primarily profit from managing chronic conditions, not from preventing them or curing them outright. Kind of reframes the whole profit motive in a really unsettling way, suggesting there's a disincentive for radical health improvements.
It definitely makes you wonder how that alleged managed decline strategy might play out in the real world. The source points to a few specific industry practices. One key thing it highlights is indication expansion. This is where existing drugs, first approved for one thing, get repurposed and marketed for totally new conditions. The source suggests this isn't always because the drug is the best option for the new condition, but more about expanding the market, creating what it calls polypharmacy opportunities, basically, getting patients on more drugs. And this can apparently lead quickly to something the industry allegedly calls the prescription cascade.
The prescription cascade. Can you break that down? That sounds, yeah, concerning.
Absolutely. The source describes it as this kind of vicious cycle. A side effect from one drug isn't recognized for what it is. Instead, it gets treated with another drug. So maybe you get a blood pressure med, then you experience anxiety as a side effect, and boom, you're prescribed an antidepressant. Or maybe a diabetes drug is suggested for weight loss, but then it causes digestive problems that need another pill. It becomes this continuous loop, according to the source. One drug's effect leads to needing another, creating this ever-growing list of daily meds, all while generating more revenue. It raises serious questions about, the overall health benefit versus the business benefit.
Wow. That makes the grandmother story feel even more significant, doesn't it? And apparently her experience wasn't totally unique. The source claims that afterward got around in her senior living community, 7 other residents this time with doctor's supervision, importantly also gradually cut back on their meds. 6 months later, 5 of those 7 showed dramatic improvements. More energy, clearer thinking, better health markers. The other 2 stabilized on lower doses. This was apparently so striking that the facility actually brought in a gerontologist who specialized in deep prescribing, which, just for our listeners, that's the careful supervised process of reducing or stopping medications, especially in older folks, when the risks might start outweighing the benefits.
Exactly. And what this gerontologist supposedly highlighted, according to the source, was really eye-opening, maybe even terrifying. She explained that a huge number of medications prescribed to seniors have never actually been properly tested on people over 85. Just think about that for a moment. The standard dosages, the known side effects, how drugs interact, it's mostly based on studies done on younger, healthier people. Yet these same powerful drugs are routinely given to 90-year-olds whose bodies process them, as the source puts it, completely differently than 60-year-olds. The source argues this is a critical, often missed point. Doctors might, without realizing it, be essentially experimenting on the elderly with drugs that, for them, could be causing more harm than good. It paints a picture of a system maybe not fully grasping its impact on its oldest patients.
Okay, so if deep prescribing can potentially lead to such big improvements, why isn't it, standard practice everywhere? The source points the finger directly at the pharmaceutical industry. It claims they just don't want you or your doctor to know much about it because it threatens their most profitable demographic. Well, think about this data the source provides. People over 65, only about 16% of the population. But they consume over 40% of all prescription drugs. That generates hundreds of billions in revenue every year. So the financial hit, if seniors suddenly needed way fewer meds, it would be, in the source's words, devastating for these companies. It suggests a fundamental conflict of interest if these claims hold water.
And the source goes further in describing the industry's influence. It outlines this pervasive system where pharma companies allegedly wield significant control over the medical establishment itself. This supposedly includes things like huge funding for medical schools, sponsoring continuing education for doctors, giving out grants for research, heavy advertising in medical journals, even funding patient advocacy groups. What this picture suggests, according to the source, is a system where questioning the standard pharmaceutical approach to aging can actually be professionally risky for doctors. And it can be financially devastating for institutions that depend heavily on that pharma funding. It creates the systemic barrier to truly objective medical practice, as the source sees it. It shapes the whole environment where healthcare decisions get made.
And the source calls the most heartbreaking part of all this how it allegedly preys on our deepest fears about aging and death. Think about it. You're 70, maybe 75, and your doctor tells you that you need this pill every day for the rest of your life to prevent a heart attack. That fear is powerful, right? It's overwhelming. So it often leads people to accept what the source calls a diminished quality of life, dealing with side effects, limitations, that daily pill routine, because the alternative seems like certain death. But the source asks, very pointedly, what if that's a false choice? What if there are other paths, other options that were just not being clearly shown?
That idea of a false choice takes us right back to those blue zones we mentioned earlier. Our source really emphasizes that in places like Sardinia and Okinawa, people aren't just living longer lives, they're living better lives. Much better. We're talking about people actively gardening at 95, dancing at 100, maintaining strong social connections, even intimacy, well into their late 90s. And the key point the source hammers home is they're doing this without handfuls of pills. Their incredible longevity and vitality is consistently linked to lifestyle factors, eating real food, moving their bodies every day, staying deeply connected socially, managing stress through community and purpose, not through drugs. What's really striking, the source claims, is that solid research on these communities has been out there for decades, but somehow it hasn't really filtered into mainstream medical training or broad public health advice. The knowledge exists, but it's not being widely applied.
And the alleged suppression of potentially helpful knowledge doesn't stop with lifestyle, according to the source. It presents another pretty startling claim, this one from a whistleblower named Dr. Michael Rodriguez. He apparently spent 15 years in pharmaceutical R&D. In an interview from 2021, he supposedly revealed that his former company had developed compounds that show remarkable promise in animal studies. We're talking extending a healthy, vibrant lifespan by 30 to 40%. But the company allegedly shelved these compounds. Why? Not because they didn't work or were dangerous. No, according to Rodriguez's claim, it was because the business model couldn't justify the R&D costs for medications that would dramatically reduce the need for other pharmaceutical interventions, end quote. Basically, the source interprets this as the company realizing they couldn't make money from keeping people too healthy for too long. So they stuck with daily taken drugs instead, which offered a more predictable, continuous revenue stream. It suggests potentially world-changing health breakthroughs might be held back for economic reasons.
It really does crystallize the source's main argument, that this huge system-wide influence doesn't just affect which drugs get made or prescribed. It actually shapes how we think about aging itself. Through what the source calls pharmaceutical-sponsored health education, we've sort of been conditioned, it argues, to just accept that things like fatigue, forgetfulness, physical weakness are just normal parts of aging that require medical management. We're taught these are inevitable, rather than maybe signals that lifestyle changes are needed. And what's maybe even more concerning is the claim that many of these exact symptoms are often side effects of the medications prescribed to treat the symptoms of aging. This creates, in the source's view, a truly vicious cycle where the supposed cure actually ends up being worse than the original disease or condition it was meant to manage.
Wow. Okay, so with all this information from the source, and it really challenges a lot of what we take for granted, what does this actually mean for you, the person listening right now? The source definitely doesn't want you to feel powerless. It says quite clearly, you don't have to be a passive victim of this system. Instead, it's about finding courage, seeking out education for yourself, and, maybe most importantly, questioning what you've always been told. It's really about taking back some agency over your own health journey.
And the source does offer some concrete steps for doing that. It suggests you start by really educating yourself about your own medications, if you take any. Understand exactly why you're taking them, their intended effects, but also their potential side effects, how they interact, and what the long-term impacts might be. It strongly pushes readers to research and then try to adopt those lifestyle factors we see in the blue zones. Regular physical activity that you enjoy, fostering those deep social connections, finding healthy ways to manage stress, cultivating a sense of purpose, and really prioritizing whole foods nutrition. And crucially, it advises seeking out healthcare providers who genuinely understand healthy aging, not just disease management, and who are open to optimizing your health. That optimization journey might include, as part of it, the gradual, always supervised reduction of unnecessary medications. This isn't about going rogue, it's about finding a real partner in your health.
That feels like a really powerful shift in perspective, doesn't it? The source really emphasizes this idea that you have far more control over your health and lifespan than the pharmaceutical industry wants you to believe. It even points to the emerging science of epigenetics and longevity research to back this up. The basic message there is often summed up as, your genes may load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So this isn't just a nice thought. It's presented as a profound message of personal power, a call to actually harness the influence you already have over your own biology.
Ultimately, yeah, our source encourages this fundamental rejection of the story that aging automatically means inevitable decline and needing more and more pills. It strongly asserts that the human body has this incredible capacity for healing and regeneration at any age, a capacity, it claims, that's often unknowingly suppressed by the very medications intended to help. This whole perspective really challenges us to rethink what healthy aging truly looks like. It pushes us to ask if maybe we've been looking for solutions primarily in pill bottles and how we can better support our body's own innate wisdom and healing potential.
So To kind of boil down the core takeaway from this really fascinating and, yes, provocative source material, the pharmaceutical industry, seen from this particular angle, doesn't necessarily want you living to 95 or 100 in robust, vibrant health, because every healthy drug-free year you live represents lost revenue to them. But for you, those extra years, those healthy years, they aren't about profit margins. They're about precious time with family and friends. They're opportunities to share your wisdom, to contribute, and just the pure joy of a long life well lived. Our show's message is pretty clear on this. Don't let them steal that from you.
It's heavy stuff. This deep dive into these particular sources really makes you think, doesn't it? If the optimal lifespan for an individual long, healthy, vibrant, and the optimal profit stream for an industry potentially managing decline are fundamentally at odds, how do we figure out the best path forward? How do we discern the true route to a long, healthy life in this age where we're just bombarded with information and sometimes really conflicting information? What stands out to you listening now in these claims, and maybe what small steps might you consider taking just to question the assumptions about aging and health that, let's be honest, we've all kind of grown up with?
Definitely food for thought. Lots of it. We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to chew on, and maybe, just maybe, sparked the new kind of conversation for you to have, perhaps, with your own trusted healthcare provider. Until next time, keep digging, keep learning, and always keep questioning.